A particular popular element of each year's conference comes up next and is made possible by our partnership with the Wallace Foundation. For the past several years, APAP has been working in conjunction with the Wallace Foundation to lift up stories about successful efforts in building communities and audiences in the performing arts in a session we call 5 Minutes to Shine. This features 5 arts leaders in racing against the clock to share galvanizing 5-minute accounts of their successes, best practices, and the risks they've taken to take their work to a new level. This year, under the guidance of Alicia Anstead, APAP's editor of Inside Arts magazine, we focus on small and mid-sized presenters who have compelling stories to tell about their community building and audience engagement work. Yesterday, Chris Van from Telluride, Colorado, Nancy Halverson from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, Josh Kahn from Baltimore, Maryland, Emily Prince of Nelsonville, Ohio, and Robin Wilkes-Dunn of Salt Lake City, Utah, shared their inspiring 5-minute stories in this year's 5 Minutes to Shine competition. Everyone who participated in 5 Minutes to Shine this year, please stand and be recognized for your work. Let's give them a round of applause. As always, the session ended with the audience voting on who would come to this stage to share their story with you. Please join me in welcoming the 5 Minutes to Shine storyteller for 2020. So it's my pleasure to introduce one of this morning's top shining moments. Please welcome Emily Prince, Education Director of Stewart Opera House in Nelsonville, Ohio.
Congratulations. Yeah, that's great.
Thank you, Krista. Thank you. It's wonderful to be here and to represent Nelsonville, Ohio. Nelsonville, Ohio. I know. Steve-O? Not that long ago, I was out at our town's new outdoor stage, and a couple of kids were jumping on the old sandstone corner blocks and doing other feats of acrobatics. I stopped one of the kids so that I could tie his shoe, and he says to me, "Have you ever seen Galumfa? I just saw them at the Opera House. I'm going to be in Galumfa when I grow up, and you should go see them when you get the chance." But you see, I have seen Galumfa because I'm the education director at Stewart's Opera House in Nelsonville, Ohio. I have made a choice to live in the poorest county in the state of Ohio, in a community ravaged by coal and clay extraction, now populated by people who are left with only their fierce love of place. So maybe the second or third thing I did when I started was to ask those same people what kind of programming they would like to see, instead of deciding for myself what I thought they needed. We produce our local high school's drama club, run a performing arts camp, artist in residence programs in 7 school districts, offer adult creative writing, and an after-school music program. On the first day of our after-school music program in 2013, we had 3 kids, the next week 6, and then we landed with 9. We now have about 35. I was leading the writing prompt in about the 3rd week and looked over to see Lucian tiny scribbling in his notebook. "What you writing, Lucian?" I asked, and he straight panicked. Without looking up, he mumbled, "I just want to practice." I said, "Okay, Lucian, you can go practice." When this kid picked up a guitar, he could shred harder than Eddie Van Halen. There was some debate about which shredder to use, but I figured people know that. But he couldn't play with anyone else. He didn't listen. He didn't communicate, and that's why his grandma signed him up for our program. He could already play. He just couldn't play with anyone else. When those misfits played at our Nelsonville Music Festival as a band, I never wept so hard through Black Sabbath. It's true. While we were building this program, we were also running a capital campaign and found ourselves in a bit of a chicken and egg situation. Can we raise $4 million in little Appalachian Nelsonville in a community where 31.5% of the population don't know where their next meal is coming from? Yes, is the answer. We moved into our new Education and Community Center, a revitalized downtown 1890s department store, in January of 2018. The entire third floor being dedicated to arts education space. We've already outgrown it. We've outgrown it by building community. We've developed a program where performance is an outcome and not the goal. We did not set out to train Lucian to be a musician. He already was. But we helped to guide him to be a compassionate citizen, a good listener, a communicator, and a participant in the wider world. A world that sees him as an old white man in a diner wearing a MAGA hat. Our kids need to be heard and seen as themselves in a world where they can honor their culture, especially when that culture doesn't fit into the preferred national narrative of dumb hillbillies, poor rural voters. If we're successful in our mission, we lose the advantage of language like underserved, poorest, least, and lacking. But we fulfill our mission just the same because of kids like Mav, because of every individual in our program. And here, with her permission, is an excerpt of a letter we received from a mom this spring. Mav has also had a pretty challenging year. My husband and I divorced primarily due to an acquired drug addiction. So he has witnessed some dark and heavy things, shouldering more than he should at this age emotionally. I share all of this with you because what I witnessed yesterday truly blew me away. Seeing that quiet and reserved kid of mine bust out of his shell and use that voice of his, and it seemed so very natural. But most importantly of all, I saw a smile break across his face several times, with teeth even. And that is not something I have witnessed in a long time. I tend to experience many little moments throughout my work that do not seem important enough to report impact. I forget them and move on to the next fire, crisis, and need. How do I really know that my work is having impact? But shouldn't we try to catalog these little moments? Have you seen the face of a kid from one of those families? You've just sat in front of a $2,500 piece of equipment and told them they're allowed to touch it? Or when that same child, Lucian in fact, who hadn't said a word to you in 2 years, thanks to the writing incident, enters the building, looks up, politely asks you how your day is going, and then tells you a joke? This is our impact. Thank you.